I'm Brandi Kruse. Coming up today on Undivided, a local teacher who's mad that people found out about his vulgar drag king persona. He's using the media as his personal PR team. Plus, Bob Ferguson is still sending out chicken checks. And Kamala Harris and Tim Walz got a familiar but unlikely nemesis in key battleground states. That and more coming up today on Undivided. Remember, you can support our show for just $5 a month by signing up at undividedpod.com. Hello and welcome to Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. Vice presidential candidate Tim Walz is in town today. In more important news, literally anything. Insert anything. No, the only impact that's having on our lives, because Tim Walz is just here for the cash machine and he's not holding any public events that we know of. The only impact it's having on us is our show is going to be slightly truncated today. I have an event in Bellevue I need to speak at, and because of the potential for traffic disruptions, we're going to cut the show about 15 minutes short today. So just be advised, but you know what? We're going to pack a lot of great stuff into 45 minutes. So I would have been content moving on with this story. We cover all sorts of stuff happening in our public school system because we are going to be a voice for parents, students, and good teachers who are sick of what our public education system has become. Apparently, our colleagues elsewhere in the media are not so interested in being a voice for people who are being, I don't know, left out, who are being hurt from an education perspective by the state of our public school system. So we'll do it. That's fine. A couple weeks ago on the show, we had done a story on, honestly, for us, this is kind of a run-of-the-mill type story. A teacher does something completely inappropriate. A student or a parent lets us know about it. We talk about it on the show. So that was the case. There was a high school teacher in Peninsula High School who apparently was moonlighting as a drag king, which, as you know, wasn't really the issue, right? The issue, as I said on the show, I love drag shows. Like, as an adult, I have attended many a drag show. And if we did a segment every time a teacher was exposed as a drag king or queen, we would probably have to have that be our full-time jobs. So the issue with this was, of course, as we stated very clearly, the vulgar nature of this particular drag king persona and the public-facing social media posts that students found out about. So anyway, we did that story, old news, blah, 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 goes through. Well, this teacher ends up quitting their job. And I think, okay, that's the decision they made. Didn't want to face their students for, who'd found out about their drag king persona. So they quit their job, so be it. But this teacher has also now decided to use the local media as their personal PR team, and it has embarked on this sob story tour amongst whatever local media will have him to come and talk about how, oh my gosh, this conservative host hates trans people and forced me out of my job just because I'm an innocent drag performer, which is obviously ridiculous. So early this morning, if you've seen it on Patreon and Locals, I published a story I want you to go read if you haven't had the time to do it after the show today. The headline, Orgasmic Drag King Convinces Media to Help Him Do Damage Control. Rather than accept any responsibility for having such poor judgment, Kelsey Wayne played the victim and reached out to local news outlets for help. So this started happening, I would say, Thursday of last week. We started getting requests from media outlets to respond to the accusations of the horrible things that we did to this teacher. So the teacher's name is Kelsey Wayne. The drag persona, as you know, is Jack King Goff. I think we got a side-by-side of the two of them here. Kelsey Wayne, Jack King Goff. So this is the Instagram account for this particular teacher, Jack King Goff, the Orgasmic Drag King. Great. Okay, great. So we had done this story, again, not because of the teacher or anything like that and what the teacher might have done in the classroom, but this obviously inappropriate drag king persona. So around last week, Thursday or so, we started getting all these requests saying, hey, this teacher is saying you've cyberbullied them, you forced them out of a job, et cetera, et cetera. So it started with the stranger on Thursday. And so far, here's the coverage that has happened in this. The stranger, Cairo 7, the News Tribune, all in the last few days. We also got requests for comment from Real Change News in Seattle. And then I think Cairo radio hosts talked about this. I didn't listen to the segment. I just heard that they talked about it. But when you read these headlines, so again, just these few, you guys know the story, right? So read these headlines. From the stranger, drag king dragged out of Peninsula School District. An online bullying campaign and Brandi Kruse segments made teaching impossible. Cairo 7 News. Gig Harbor teacher quits, cites cyberbullying. The News Tribune. Pierce County teacher and drag king resigns from school district amid cyberbullying. So if you just were an average news consumer and you saw one of those headlines, you would think this was about a teacher who just does drag in their free time being bullied and vilified, and then they had to quit their job, and it's this horrible conservative commentator who did this to this poor drag king, which of course is not the case. And what every single one of these stories really failed to capture is the overarching point why this was a segment for us in the first place. I actually think, as I wrote in my story this morning, I think the stranger did the best job. I mean, I think their story was ridiculous, but they didn't beat around the proverbial bush. They acknowledged that I don't have an issue with drag performers. I have an issue with the vulgar nature of this person's posts, calling themselves an orgasmic drag king named Jack King Off, and posting a variety of other things. But the stranger just doesn't care. The stranger basically said, well, kids aren't being exposed for the first time to masturbation puns. So that's just the stranger being weird, right? The stranger thinks it's perfectly normal for a teacher to have public-facing social media profiles of their alter drag persona, orgasmic drag king, jacking off. So that's fine. The stranger is going to do what the stranger does. But for actual news outlets to buy into this sob story and paint it as like, oh, this poor teacher, it's just because they're trans and do drag, and now they're being vilified by Brandi Kruse. It's ridiculous. So this is from the News Tribune. This is their opening paragraph. An English teacher resigned from their teaching job last week through a mutual agreement with the Peninsula School District after online trolls began attacking their after-hours profession as a drag king on social media. And the information was amplified by a local conservative commentator. Again, nothing in there about the fact that this had to do with vulgarity. This had to do with a teacher, someone who teaches high school kids, thinking it's appropriate to have a public-facing profile where they are calling themselves jacking off. Orgasmic drag king with a little squirting emoji. If you don't know what that is, I mean, put two and two together, right? Orgasmic squirting emoji. So they completely failed to capture the key reason we did a segment on this in the first place and go on to totally normalize it. A couple of things, I'm just going to bounce around to some of these stories so you can see, because here's the deal. We were perfectly content, like I said, letting this go. But now it's become a broader story about a few things that we care about on the show. There's no accountability for actions anymore. No one wants to take accountability for their own behavior. They want to play the victim and they want to blame other people. So instead of Kelsey Wayne taking accountability for his own poor judgment, he has to go on a media tour to make it sound like I'm to blame for his decision to have a sexually explicit public-facing drag persona, which is just ridiculous. And I think that's problematic of a lot of young people in this country in all sorts of jobs, that they don't want to take responsibility for their actions. The second element is how far our standards have fallen for public school teachers, where it would be deemed by some people to be perfectly acceptable for a teacher to have a profile like that students were able to discover. How have we gotten to a place where we're even debating whether that's appropriate behavior from a school teacher? And then the third element is how captured the media is. They will look for any reason to rail against conservatives and to drive division. That's what they're doing. They're going to act like we're the divisive ones. No, they're creating a divisive narrative that this is a poor trans person, attacked by a conservative. That is the predominant narrative they're pushing, and it's a completely false narrative, and it is a false division that is intended to divide us where no such divisions exist. There isn't a division between conservatives and drag performers. A lot of drag performers are like theatrical performers. Conservatives don't care about that. They care when there's a line crossed between kids and sexually explicit drag shows. And that's very clear, but the media refuses to capture that nuance. And that's true in these stories as well. You know, one of the things I thought was interesting, going to the stranger story, you know, Kelsey Wayne wants to go on this tour. Oh, I had to quit my job. Oh, because Brandi Kruse is so mean. But the truth is, as the stranger reported, there was enough backlash against Kelsey Wayne within the school district and students and parents well before we became aware of it, that he had decided not to come to class for several days because things were so bad. The stranger says, the district didn't fire Wayne. They took leave voluntarily after their union advised them to stay home for safety reasons. And they stayed home when the commotion didn't stop. After a few days passed, when it seemed plausible they might return to work, conservative commentator Brandi Kruse obliterated any chance of that with a segment on her show, Undivided with Brandi Kruse. This is a quote from Kelsey Wayne. The district was already having a hard time with the community because of the initial Instagram post, and then the Brandi thing threw kerosene on the fire. I literally can't do my job because the kids are only going to think about one thing. Then they're not going to be able to focus, and therefore I'm no longer able to be a competent employee. I hate that. Whose fault is that? Whose fault is it that because students saw your public-facing social media posts, you can no longer be a competent employee, and the kids are only going to be able to focus on one thing? Is that my fault? Is that the fault of students who happen to find your profiles on Instagram? Is it the fault of parents who are concerned? No, it's your fault. Kelsey, it's your fault. That's where you've gone wrong. You refuse to take responsibility because in today's society, we don't expect people to take responsibility for their actions. But because you want to continue to raise this issue in the media and spin a sad sob story, then I'm going to continue to remind you that this is your fault. This is a decision you made. I would also note that it's a decision Kelsey made fully aware of the possible implications. In multiple stories, Kelsey Wayne is quoted as saying that he knew that if people at the school found out about his drag persona, it could create a problem for him. This is from the News Tribune. They say, and by the way, they use they, them pronouns. I'm not using they, them pronouns. In fact, I think Jack King Off's Instagram profile said he, them. Yeah, I'm not saying they, them. That doesn't make any sense. It's not grammatically correct. I'm not doing it. So I'll say he. But the News Tribune, so if you're confused by the writing, that's what it is. They never brought it up in the classroom, but told colleagues and supervisors about it when they were hired. The reason they didn't tell students and their families was because they wanted to keep their two professions separate, Wayne said. They typically do drag on the weekends and sometimes Friday nights. If students knew they were a drag king, that could be a distraction in the classroom and make it difficult to teach, according to Wayne. Again, whose problem is that? It could make it, if they knew that they were a drag king, it would make a distraction in the classroom and it'd make it difficult to teach. So Kelsey Wayne knew that as an educator and thought, well, they'll just maybe never find it. They'll never find out. Well, they did find out. And now you're suffering the very consequences that you anticipated you would suffer if they found out that you were a drag performer. So why are you suddenly all mad and doing a media tour to try to garner sympathy for an outcome that you knew when you took the job as a teacher was very plausible if people found out? Again, Kelsey, that's your fault. That's not my fault. It's not the fault of students. It's not the fault of parents. It's not the fault of conservatives. It's not the fault of transphobes or a cyberbullying campaign. It's your fault because you don't have good judgment. But going deeper into this rabbit hole of how bad the media covered this, it's just insane. Like, oh, you have a sob story about a conservative being mean to you. Come on in and we'll just regurgitate it to all our viewers and listeners and readers and we won't question anything. So one of the things I made clear on the show was the most problematic post from Jack King Off was a post, picture in drag. It said, lock up your daughters, Jack Goff is here. To which I saw that and thought what the parents who sent it to us thought. That's creepy. Lock up your daughters? You teach high school girls. And you're saying lock up your daughters, Jack Off is here? And I said on the show, if that had been a cis white male teacher, is that cis heterosexual teacher, and a parent saw that where the teacher was like, lock up your daughters, I'm here, I would like call the cops and be like, hey, check this guy out. He's super creepy. So anyway, I expressed on the show that was one of the most concerning elements of this that made it much different than a teacher just doing drag at night. Listen to the extent that the News Tribune went to explain away that post that I just shared with you. This is wild. It says, that was the first post that Wayne made for their drag king character jacking off. 3 years before they became a teacher, they told the News Tribune. Kruse didn't mention that Wayne had been dressed up as a hair metal, a subgenre of heavy metal musician at the time, and the line "Lock Up Your Daughters" was a reference to a 1981 song of the same name by English rock band Slade. It also appears in song lyrics to a 1976 song by AC/DC called TNT. It's an allusion to a reoccurring trope in heavy metal and fit the version of the early Jack Off character Wayne was performing at the time, playing off stereotypes of rock stars, they said. Oh, silly me. Sorry, I've totally forgot about the obscure 1981 song "Lock Up Your Daughters" by the very well-known English rock band Slade. Stupid. Surely the kids who were born in like the year 2000 should have known about when they saw that. Oh, it's not concerning. Guys, don't you know? This is a allusion to a reoccurring trope in heavy metal and fit the narrative of Jack Off's early character. Nicole, I should have known. I should have known. The TNT lyric, from 1976, the Slade song, 1981. How stupid of me. Yeah, that's a news outlet that went to those lengths to excuse a high school teacher posting, "Lock up your daughters, Jack Off is here." And nowhere in there did the Tacoma News Tribune, did Cairo 7, did The Stranger question Wayne about their decision-making. Push back and say, hey, okay, it might be like a heavy metal trope from a 1981 lyric from a English rock band nobody's ever heard of, but don't you think if a student or a parent saw it, they might take it a different way? Right? That's pretty reasonable. That's a pretty journalistic question to have any pushback at all. Instead, they launch into why I should have known that this was some sort of reference to a song that no one's ever heard of. Maybe you have, but I guess I wasn't born back then. So all of that is just absolutely absurd. But the Cairo 7 story really took the cake for me. The Cairo 7 TV story, first of all, TV stories are so shallow and vapid, it's just hard to watch. I get this message yesterday from Deborah Horn at Cairo 7, who, I'll just say, has been the laughingstock of Seattle TV reporters for a long time. Is that mean? It's true. It's true. One of my biggest memories. And here's why. Because she's the caricature of a TV reporter. The character of, one of my biggest memories of Deborah Horn. We were at a murder, a first appearance in a homicide case where a young girl had been killed. And she sticks her mic in the face of this dad who just lost her daughter and is like, how sad are you, basically? And we're all sitting there like, what are you doing? Have some empathy. Fast forward a couple years when the guy was sentenced in that case, the dad walks out of the courtroom. This is just a story to set you up on Deborah Horn. Dad walks out of the courtroom. This is the young girl who was shot in the neck and killed by a random guy who was just going around shooting at random. So you might remember the case. I'm not going to put him on blast here, but dad walks down. All the TV stations, including Cairo 7, are streaming live. And he starts by saying, I just want to thank the media, essentially, for, being on this journey with us and for their sympathy, except you, Deborah Horn. Literally, because that's how bad she is. She just will absolutely pull anything for a soundbite, whatever it is. So that's how I feel. But anyway, so Cairo 7 covers this story. I get a message from, what, Nicole? Does that mean? Am I cyberbullying Deborah Horn now? Am I wrong?
I mean, I don't know her very well. I mean, I see where you're coming from. Yeah.
She's the character of a news reporter. So there's nothing serious happening here. And I'm sorry, you do a half-assed story about me, I'm going to tell you how I really feel about it.
Yep.
Anyway, Nicole's over there wide-eyed. It's fine, I don't care. So I get a message like 2 hours before they're going to air their story in the 5 o'clock news. Deborah, I was on TV. I know that a story doesn't come together at 3 p.m. when it's going to be on the 5 o'clock news. I know that you got that assignment at 9 or 10 in the morning. So she
was in Gig Harbor.
100%. You went to Gig Harbor. I know how TV assignments work. You knew you were going to do a story telling this sob story for this teacher without pushing back against anything he, whatever, did or wrote. And you had all that time, hours and hours, to contact me for comment. You chose to do it at 3 p.m. The only reason it was very clear that she contacted me is she wanted to use our video for the show, which I don't even think she had to use permission for. I told her no, but she could have used it anyway. That's totally fair use. I wouldn't have sued you. But it was like, didn't even really want, I sent a statement, but it was clear all she wanted was to be able to use video of me being mean to this teacher or whatever. So anyway, I was like eagerly awaiting. I wonder what kind of gem of reporting Cairo 7 will put on the news. Let's go through it, shall we? Here we go.
A Gig Harbor teacher is quitting their day job over online hate.
Yeah, no, they're not quitting their day job over online hate. They're quitting their day job because they got caught doing something that they knew they shouldn't be doing by their own admission. Let's continue.
The allegation is that the teacher posted about their drag performance in a sexually explicit manner online.
Yeah, that's not an allegation. You don't have to say the allegation is. He literally posted about his drag persona online in a sexually explicit manner, calling himself the orgasmic drag king, Jack King Goff. It's not an allegation. That's just what he did. Let's continue.
Kay Wayne says they quit because of what they say was cyberbullying by a local online conservative commentator. Is it hard to look at?
No.
No?
I've seen it. I don't care. Is it hard to look at? That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. How corny is that? Is it hard to look at? What do you mean is it hard to look at? Oh, no, I don't care. Clearly you care, because that's like the 5th media interview you've done on it, whining about it. So it's so corny. Anyway, okay, let's keep going.
As far as you're concerned, you'd be fine if they came back?
Yeah, I just think that online stuff should stay online. Maybe make your accounts private.
There you go. So the students have more common sense than their teacher. Like, hey, do what you want to do, right? Within reason. Don't break any laws. Obviously, that's a totally different scenario. But if you want to be the orgasmic drag king, Jack King off, you should have done a better job taking reasonable steps to say, hey, I know this is going to be a problem if my kids find out about it, the students find out about it, teachers find out about it. So I'm not going to make it public. So even the kids know. Yeah, but hey, you should probably make that private. Wow. What a concept. All right. Let's keep going.
Out of work, but not out of options, that teacher says. Their plan is to apply for work next time in the private sector.
First of all, okay, here's the thing. You think the private sector will tolerate that? Public school teachers in the public sector, they tolerate a lot. There's a lot of things that they're perfectly fine with school teachers doing in the classroom and out of the classroom. It takes, especially as a trans individual, there's a lot that you have to do to get fired in the public sector. You think the private sector will tolerate that nonsense? Not a chance in the world. So if you think that's a safe haven for that kind of conduct, it's going to be much, much worse, because the private sector actually cares about, how they're perceived by the public and blowback and things like that to their bottom line. All right, let's do one more.
I did hear from the commentator Wayne accuses of costing them
That's me.
their job. The commentator says no one forced them to quit. That, quote, they made a choice to quit their job rather than face their students after their sexually explicit public posts came to light.
It's the only common sense thing about that whole story is my quote. I had to laugh though, because when this just shows the bias, right? It's more than me just ranting about like, oh, the news media is losing it over a segment I did. I love it. Thank you for the attention. But it shows the bias in there, right? First of all, who gets to decide whether I'm labeled a conservative commentator? Who gets to decide? I mean, I'm conservative on a lot of things, but on like social issues, not at all. So they get to decide based on their own bias, like we're going to label her a conservative commentator. We don't really refer to ourselves as a conservative commentator. I mean, that's just what people label us, and that's fine. But she refused to say my name. So you saw it there on the graphic, but Deborah Horn refused to say my name. And in the written story for Cairo 7, they put a quote for me that I gave her on the record, but didn't attribute it to me. Just a local online conservative commentator. So I think there's a few reasons. They wanted to vilify me. They wanted to vilify me, right? And they wanted to create that division where division didn't exist, saying, oh, it's just a nameless, faceless conservative who hates trans people. And I think they know that I have a much better reputation than that. And that if they had used my name and said my name in their quote, that there's a lot of people who wouldn't have bought it. They wouldn't have bought that divide that they were selling. Because again, when it comes to, gay rights issues, hell, when it comes to drag and all these things, I'm pretty liberal. And so it's much easier to say nameless, faceless, conservative commentator hates trans teacher who did drag. Again, that's why we call this show Undivided. This is the perfect illustration. People think we call the show Undivided because I'm going to get on here and say everybody just needs to come together and we just need to agree on everything. No, the show is an aggressive rejection of fringe ideologies that are intended to divide us. And until we recognize that, until we reject them, and efforts like this, we won't be undivided as a society. That's the quickest way we can come together, is if we spot things like this and say, no, Brandi doesn't hate trans people. She wasn't vilifying this teacher simply because they do drag. She had a legitimate criticism of a teacher who called themselves the orgasmic drag king jacking off and said, lock up your daughters and we should expect more. And as the media, demand more of public employees who our taxpayer funds pay. You get it?
And they wouldn't even say the things we were complaining about that
Wouldn't even say it.
Children saw because it was not okay for TV.
Never, Deborah Horn in the Cairo 7 story, online, on TV, never said what Kelsey Wayne's drag name was. Never said Jack King off. Never said orgasmic drag king. Why do you think that is? Well, the FCC probably wouldn't allow it. It was inappropriate for TV. So that's a big freaking clue that it's probably inappropriate as a teacher to put it on a public-facing profile that kids were able to easily access. So again, let's go through the 3 points here and what this all teaches us. I'm sure Kelsey Wayne just wanted like 15 minutes of fame for their Instagram account, and the media was happy to give it to him. The big points here in the big picture, it's more than just like, oh, this story complaining about all this stuff, whatever it is. The media, this shows the media's bias. 100%. This was about creating division and propping up this false narrative that conservatives hate drag, conservatives hate LGBTQ. This is also about the younger generation being taught that they don't have to take accountability for their behavior. They don't have to take accountability for their actions. They're the victim. And everything bad that happens to them isn't about their life choices. It's about things other people did to them. And I don't believe, Kelsey Wayne, that that's going to get you very far in life if that's the mentality that you take with you. And then finally, what I would say is we have to have higher standards for public school teachers. You want to do drag at night? Fine. Like I said, some drag performers I've seen, it's about singing and dancing. It's like the same as a theatrical performance. They're not stripping down naked or doing, vulgar gestures or something like that. It's fine. But you have to understand, you have to be very clear with the school, and you have to understand that if those two worlds cross, there might be problems for you, as Kelsey Wayne did. Kelsey anticipated this and then got mad on the back end when people found out, and he felt forced to quit his job as a result, which nobody told him he had to. So we have to have higher standards, but it's the media that helps amplify those higher standards. And if the media is not willing to have higher standards for public schools, I guess it goes to the students, the parents, and people like us to make sure that higher standards are met. All right, we're going to get to a couple updates on the initiative front coming up next. First, if you're thinking about selling your home this year, I highly recommend reaching out to our friend Wes Jones of sellwithwes.com. He and his team have an innovative marketing strategy to make sure that you're getting the most possible eyeballs on your listing and that it's standing out. Retired Seattle police officer Mike Boggs, he utilized Wes Jones and his listing boost concierge service. Couldn't believe how fast his home sold.
Wes came out and met with us, and we told him what our concerns were. And he mentioned the concierge service, and we did take advantage of it. And it was, I think, the smartest thing we've ever done as far as selling a house. We sold in 6 days for a full asking price. It was really amazing, especially in, this isn't the greatest climate for house sales right now. And that's one of the concerns we had was we're, building a house. And so you have to kind of time this correctly so that you have the proceeds from the house that you're selling to put towards the house that you're going to be buying or building. And we actually put on the market a little sooner than we thought we needed to, and it sold so fast that it was this is fantastic.
Yeah, that's not the first success story we've heard. So if you're selling your home, reach out to our friend Wes Jones, sellwithwes.com, sellwithwes.com. A better way to sell your home. And congratulations to Mike Boggs for retiring from SPD, now living in sunny Arizona. Love it. I'm jealous. All right, big win for the initiatives at a time when they really, really needed it. All that money flooding in to try to defeat the initiatives. I've said the Seattle Times is throwing some bones, right? So it was, what was the one the Seattle Times endorsed yesterday? The gas ban, saying that they want voters to vote yes on the initiative to protect natural gas as a choice for residents and businesses. And I said, they might throw in one more bone. I'm not sure. I don't think it's going to be on capital gains. But they finally came out. It was about an hour after our show ended yesterday and said, vote yes on Initiative 2124 to make the long-term care tax optional. Still not forgiving the Seattle Times for many of their endorsements, but this helps, so we'll take it. It says the Seattle Times editorial board recommends vote yes on Initiative 2124, give residents more choice on WA Cares. And they went in there and they talked about some of the elements of the long-term care program that are problematic, because they are. The program's been an absolute disaster. It says the inability of main beneficiary to transfer benefits upon his or her death. So let's say you're paying into it, and you die early. And it's like, okay, you can't transfer that benefit, so the state just gets to keep all that money. The continuity rule, so if someone takes a break from employment for 5 years or more, then re-enters the workforce, the calendar resets at zero. Who do you think does that the most? Moms, women, who maybe leave the workforce for a period of time to rear their child, and then they come back in and they're like, well, now I have to get vested in this all over again. And then it says the clunky process for accessing benefits if the worker moves out of state. It says the need is great, but this flawed piece of legislation failed to meet the moment. The editorial board recommends voting yes, which would end mandatory participation in WA Cares. If lawmakers choose in the future to revisit this concept, we strongly urge them to do so, but they should take a better thought out approach. 100%. So I'm glad the Seattle Times saw that. Like, look, yeah, long-term care and the need to prepare for our future. I mean, we know people are saving less, they're less prepared for retirement, our money isn't going as far. There's a lot of people who are going to need some form of care long term. If you think a government mandated socialized program is going to do the trick, it's not at all, especially not one as poorly thought out as this that has so many obvious issues. And this initiative doesn't repeal the long-term care program. It lets you decide, do you want it? Do you want to pay into it to benefit from it later on or not? My choice is going to be hell to the no. I won't get back what I paid into it so far, which seems like they should have to give it back to you if you never wanted to be part of it in the first place. But I will say, so that happened. And then Let's Go Washington, man, they've got some fire ads out lately. They released an ad that I think highlights in a very effective, emotional way one of the many downfalls of the long-term care program.
I've always loved working. It's important to me. WA Cares requires me to work 500 hours a year for 10 years to access the lifetime benefit. I can't physically work that much. Why am I forced to pay into a plan that I can never use? Instead of being able to choose a plan that works for me, right now WA Cares denies that choice. Voting yes on I-2124 gives me and every worker a choice in their long-term care.
How are you going to argue against that? I will say in full transparency, I actually know Soren. Soren's mom's active in political circles. I know them both very well. And I know very well from talking to his mother the ways in which he struggled in this regard. Trying to, as a disabled person, work enough hours where you can have some money coming in, but not work so many hours where you lose other benefits in the social safety net. So this is a program that forces someone like Soren to pay into it, and they're never going to be able to benefit from it. That's not fair. So we're going to vote yes, pay less, and we're going to vote yes for people like Soren. One other issue on the initiative front. So late last night, I dropped our latest candidate interview in the 2024 election cycle with Nick Brown, a Democrat running to be Washington State's next Attorney General. He has the endorsement of his former boss, Jay Inslee. He has the endorsement of the current Attorney General, Bob Ferguson. Despite that, he was nice enough to come in and sit down with me for more than an hour. We talked about a lot of stuff. There's no paywall on this interview, so you can go to Patreon Locals watch it today, completely free. But one of the things we talked about are the initiatives. If one or more of these initiatives pass in November, it's very likely that there is going to be a concerted legal effort to undermine them. So I asked Nick Brown, if he's elected Attorney General, is he going to defend the will of voters? Do you support or oppose the initiatives on the ballot in November?
I oppose them.
You oppose all of them. So if there is legal action challenging the outcome of those, let's say they pass,
I will defend them.
how should we believe that you're going to defend them if you oppose them?
Because that's the job of the lawyer for the state of Washington. This is actually something where Pete and I have real fundamental disagreements. Pete, my opponent, who has said in various contexts that he won't defend things that he has independently determined are unconstitutional. If the people of the state of Washington pass that, or any of those initiatives, one or all four, they become the law of the land. It is the job of the Attorney General to defend the law of the state. And that's what I will do to the best of my interest, or best of my ability.
I've got to just point it out. Your campaign manager who's sitting behind you.
He's not my manager, but go ahead.
What's your job, Sandeep? I'm a consultant. Your campaign consultant who's in the room with us, he is one of the main people pushing the No on the Initiative campaign. He's one of the main people behind trying to defeat the initiatives. He's running your campaign.
He's not running my campaign.
Well,
but
he's
part of
consulting
the team.
with. He's here with you. He's consulting with your campaign. I'm sorry to put him on blast.
He's a proud member of my team, but I don't
again, you can see my thought process of he opposes the initiatives. His consultant is trying to defeat the initiatives, and you're telling me if we pass them, you're going to defend them.
You've been around this for long enough.
I have, and I've also been around a lot of shady shit.
But look, it is the job of the Attorney General to defend Washington state law.
Yeah.
I will not abdicate my job simply because I might disagree with it.
So you don't think it would be proper for you to maybe put it to someone else?
No.
Okay.
I mean, look, I've been a prosecutor, I've been a defense lawyer, I've done private practice, I've argued multiple cases in the Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. I've done a ton of jury trials, which I don't think Pete has ever done. I know what it's like to be an advocate. And I've gone into court and argued things that were in my client's interest. And that's the job of being the Attorney General when it comes to laws passed by the people or by the legislature.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I can't do anything other than take you at your word.
Sure.
Because they are going to pass.
Well, look at that. We made news here.
And
They're
your
passing.
own consultant will probably lead the lawsuits to challenge them. Poor Sandeep Kaushik, caught in the middle. But it's a valid line of questioning. And I think a lot of people have some skepticism that, hey, you've got Nick Brown and his allies who are opposed to the initiatives, but he would be tasked with trying to defend them. And so if you want to watch that full interview, it's up again, no paywall. Go to undividedpod.com and just click on one of our subscription platforms. And we talked about a lot of stuff. I give him a lot of credit for coming in. He's clearly a very smart guy. Talked about gun control, emergency powers, you name it, a whole ton of stuff. So again, Nick Brown, Democratic candidate for Attorney General, says he'll defend the initiatives. All I can do is take him at his word if and until that day comes. All right. Firstmarkinsurance.com. You know by now the insurance market is insane right now. One little claim dropped you like a hot potato. Yeah. Thank you. I was going to say hot pancake. I really suck at metaphors. It's one of, if I had to list my biggest failures as a human, it's metaphors.
Fair.
They'll drop you like a hot pancake. That's why you need it first. I mean, I would drop a hot pancake for sure. I don't know why I'd have a pancake in my hand. Anyway, firstmarkinsurance.com, they work for you, not the insurance carriers. Firstmark will fully analyze your current coverage. They'll make sure you're not overpaying for the wrong coverage, which could leave you at risk for financial loss. And then they carefully search the market, dozens of major carriers to find you the best fit. And that's it. That's the Firstmark challenge. It's totally free. Firstmark Insurance has helped thousands of families successfully manage the complicated world of insurance and save them thousands, me included. Mike and I are members of the Firstmark family. Nicole's a member. You know who just became a member of the Firstmark family?
Who?
Daryl.
Oh, look at that.
Daryl and Meg got married. They just bought a house that they're moving into now. And they got their insurance through Firstmark. A whole undivided team, members of the Firstmark family. Mm-hmm. Be the next Firstmark Challenge victory. Take the Firstmark Challenge now. It's free. Firstmarkinsurance.com, firstmarkinsurance.com. You know, and the other thing is we don't get deals through Firstmark. No. So when we do that and I tell you that we're members of the Firstmark family, they're advertisers on our show. I don't get some special rate or deal by Mike and I doing our insurance through FirstMark. We're doing it because we did the FirstMark challenge and it was awesome and we saved money and we got better insurance and it was the best for us. So just so you know. All right, I got to keep cooking here. So the chicken checks, people are still getting chicken checks. Suspicious. Let's talk about it in our segment, Unbelievable. Bob Ferguson has no shame. We already know that, right? So when he was first sending out, so there was a lawsuit of price fixing with chicken and tuna companies. So then he starts sending out these refund checks with his name emblazoned on them and these letters saying, how great am I? Here's your chicken check refund, peon, as he's running for governor. And all of us were like, that's suspicious. Come on, man. But they kept doing it despite the fact that it became very clear that there was really no standard for who was getting these checks. You didn't have to prove that you had been swindled by the chicken and tuna companies. You didn't have to prove financial need because a lot of people were getting the checks who told us, I don't need this. I'm of like high financial needs. And then, worst of all, people were getting sent checks who'd been dead for decades. We talked to family who they got a check for a loved one who'd been dead for 40 years. So it turned out they'd use this Experian database to send these checks out. It was never about the checks. It was always about Bob Ferguson getting this letter in the mail to as many voters as possible before November. Clear as day. So that's been like a year, right, since that happened? We've gotten 3 or 4 emails in the past week from people saying they just got a chicken check, accompanied by the letter that says, as Attorney General, one of my top priorities is protecting consumers from fraud and deception. When corporations don't play by the rules, my team and I take action. And they say, enclosed is a check, and it's got Bob Ferguson's name on it. This is election tampering. This is election influence. That's all that is, especially since they're continuing to use the same database. We've had no indication that they've changed course, that was sending out checks to people who didn't need them, shouldn't have qualified for them, or who were long since deceased. So this is just about influencing the election. Now, Nicole reached out to the Attorney General's office this morning. We did, shockingly, get a response, although the office usually responds.
Yeah, they're pretty good about it.
It's the campaign that won't respond to us, right? Okay,
Correct.
sorry. I apologize, Brianna. Brianna said, aho, with the Attorney General's office. Hi, Nicole. As you may recall, we conducted a claims process to ensure everyone who qualifies for restitution is included. We announced the claims process at the time that the first round of checks went out, and every other time we spoke publicly about this restitution process. The claims process closed in June. The claims administrator has been auditing the claims since that time, weeding out fraudulent, redundant, and ineligible claims. The administrator concluded that process in early September and started the mailing process September 12th. All the checks were mailed out by September 24th. So basically saying, hey, people were able to file a claim if they thought that they should be getting a chicken check. So it just happens to be the timing of the process that the remainder of the checks are going out a couple weeks before ballots go out. She said, is there anything else worth in there? I'm just trying to see if there's anything, because they kind of get sassy with us.
Well, no, then she just explains that like this is something they do. They always fight for people and get them money and whatever. Again, we were focused on the timing of it and, specifically from Bob Ferguson.
And the shoddy rollout, right? The shoddy rollout of they've never had to answer for, and Bob really hasn't been pressed about this on the campaign trail, having to answer for the fact that like dead people were getting checks.
Correct.
Many, not just a few, many examples, probably 30 sent to us alone. So he's never had to answer for that. And again, that's another failure of the media. Unbelievable.
I just think it's funny that they had such a big complaint when Trump was sending out checks with his name on it, but Bob's doing it right before the election.
I know, right?
And right before, I think they came out in December, January last year. And,
hypocrisy.
Yep.
Ridiculous. Okay. We're going to fly through to questions, comments. I told you I got to end a little early today so I can get through the Tim Walz traffic to an event I'm going to. So a lot happening nationally around the world. You need to make sure your retirement portfolio is properly protected against risk. You can't have someone just doing this passively. You have to have someone like Bulwark Capital and our friend Zach Abraham and their Bulwark analysts who are tracking events closely so they can make adjustments to market risks every day to help shield your portfolio as much as possible. Risk management is Bulwark's #1 focus because you only get one retirement. They want to make sure you get the retirement you've worked so hard for. So learn about Bulwark's risk management strategy and their free common sense investing guide. Get yours now by going to knowyourriskradio.com. Knowyourriskradio.com. Okay, we're flying through. See how much we can fit into a show? Let's get to our daily subscriber show poll, which went out on Patreon, Locals, and X. This is going to be one of those episodes where podcast listeners can't listen to it on 2x speed because 2x speed will be like 4x speed because I'm talking so fast today. All right, I asked you guys in our daily subscriber show poll, what do you believe is the biggest driver of media bias? And I think I was inspired to put this one out because of the clear media bias against me, a conservative local online political commentator who shall be completely nameless.
See, wouldn't it be
but
fun
hates
if she
trans
had
people
said that?
allegedly.
If she had just said political commentator instead of conservative commentator, just
'Cause it's
slapping that title on.
Right. So again, like, you know, I'm conservative on a lot of things, but you could easily call me a liberal commentator on my liberal stances. You've chosen, you know what I mean? Like, I don't get it. But it's just, it's their bias, right? So do you believe it's the personal bias of reporters, the bias of ownership, fear of pushing back, or just that there's wider societal acceptance of liberal views, which I really think is a thing. Like Hollywood has made it so you can be liberal, that's cool, can't be conservative, automatically bad, and automatically labeled and vilified as a conservative commentator. So a lot of you are saying you think it's the bias of ownership, but others disagree. Chris Horblitz says reporters without a doubt. It might have started with ownership catering to a specific side of the aisle, but now that it's manifested in hiring, all you have to do is look at the temper tantrums they have at the New York Times and the Washington Post. At least 80% identify as Democrats and have no interest in having their beliefs questioned. And by the way, that would also be relevant to something like Fox News, right? Fox News is, and I don't think that it's fair to characterize them as like a regular unbiased media outlet, because I don't think they characterize themselves that way, maybe. But, you know, it's like an MSNBC and Fox, I always exclude from these conversations because they are what they are. I'm talking about the outlets that are supposed to be neutral, the CNNs, the CBSs, NBCs, Washington Post, New York Times, local TV stations, etc. Richard Streifel, it all starts with ownership, the culture they create and the people they hire to fit within their designed culture. David Sprinkle, stats show that 80% of reporters are Democrats. I think it actually might be more than that. Somewhere along the way, the investigative reporter was replaced by Ivy League journalism graduates. I can't say you're wrong. Jones says all of the above, but I think they're afraid of retribution. Why else would they endorse these doofuses? Yeah, that's for the editorial boards for sure. I think there's an element of, well, you know, they think Bob Ferguson's going to be the governor and he wants to give them tax breaks. So certainly we can't support Dave Reichert because if Bob's the governor, we won't get those tax breaks we want so much. Y says, all of the above, I think, except for fear of pushback. I am just flabbergasted as to why the news and reporters are totally fine doing this. Lack of integrity, rampant. I agree. All right, some other questions and comments. We'll do the super chats. Andy Silly, $20 super chat. Thanks, Andy. The value of Brown's position, Nick Brown, is only as high as prosecutors and a judge's opinions on what is necessary. In this day and age of justice under socialist prejudice, those opinions merit rigorous scrutiny. Janelle Villegas with a $20 super chat. Brandi, do you know where to go to donate money to Dave Reichert and Let's Go Washington? And do you think there's still time to get their own commercials out? Yes. And I know they need money to keep these things on the air. So just go to their campaign websites. I think it's letsgowa.com. I'm not sure what Dave Reichert's is. Can you look at, is it just Dave Reichert for Gov or something? You could just Google it quick and it'll pop up. Nicole will find it.
Reichert for governor.
Reichert for governor. Nadine says, Brandi, just say you're a human commentator. That way no one can be offended. Yeah. I want to know how many times I misgendered Kay Wayne during my first segment, and that's going to be more online bullying. It's too much. I'm not using they, them. I'm not doing it.
It's not two people. I'll say
it's
he
not
or
two
she,
people.
but it's not two people.
Not two people.
It bugs me that news, which is supposed to be truth, and I mean, we tear that apart as it is, but, but it's ridiculous.
Yeah, Kathy says, stupidity has consequences. Don't feel bad for the guy. I don't feel bad. And that's why I spent the first half hour of an already truncated show talking about it. All right, Nicole, thank you very much. With that, we're going to slide on into our closing sanity check. It's too good to skip over. All right, there is a new force fighting back against Kamala Harris and Tim Walz in battleground states, and she might be familiar to you. Check it out.
The election has already started. Absentee ballots have been sent. We need to catch up rapidly. We need everyone here to get active. We need to be clear about what our goals are. We are not in a position to win the White House. But we do have a real opportunity to win something historic. We could deny Kamala Harris the state of Michigan. And the polls show that most likely Harris cannot win the election without Michigan.
That is former socialist Seattle City Councilwoman Kshama Sawant campaigning in Michigan for Jill Stein against Kamala Harris. Glory. I love it. Is my mic on? Yes. Sorry, I couldn't hear myself. Want to make sure that clapping came through. Okay, I gotta go. That has been your sanity check for today. That has been today's episode of Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for your commitment.
Wow.
Support our show. undividedpod.com. undividedpod.com. Appreciate every single one of you. That's it. I gotta go. I'll be back tomorrow. Good stuff.